I'm not ashamed.
What was the fourth plague that God inflicted upon Egypt? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Exodus on Walking Through the Bible.
His word, the glory of his cross.
If you have a Bible with you, you can turn to Exodus chapter 8. We're going to be reading from verses 20 to 24. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So, Exodus chapter 8, beginning at verse 20. And the Lord said to Moses, Rise early in the morning and stand before Pharaoh as he comes out to the water. Then say to him, Thus says the Lord, Let my people go that they may serve me. Or else, if you will not let my people go, behold, I will send swarms of flies on you and your servants, on your people, and into your houses. The houses of the Egyptians shall be full of swarms of flies, and also the ground on which they stand. And in that day I will set apart the land of Goshen, in which my people dwell, that no swarms of flies shall be there, in order that you may know that I am the Lord in the midst of the land. I will make a difference between my people and your people. Tomorrow this sign shall be. And the Lord did so. Thick swarms of flies came into the house of Pharaoh, into his servants' houses, and into all the land of Egypt. The land was corrupted because of the swarms of flies. In chapters 7 and 8, we've been reading about the plagues that have been inflicted upon Egypt by God. Bible students know that there will be 10 plagues that God will send upon Egypt, meaning that before this episode, we've only looked at 3 of those plagues. The first plague was the Nile River water being turned into blood. The second plague was the Nile bringing forth an overabundance of frogs. And the third plague was that the dust of the earth became lice or ticks. The first 2 plagues could be imitated by the magicians of Pharaoh, either by trickery or unwittingly by the power of God. But the third plague could not, causing the magicians to admit that the miracle was performed by the finger of God. After all 3 of these plagues, Pharaoh hardened his heart and would not let the children of Israel go. We now come to the 4th plague. Like with the first 2 plagues, God again sent a warning to Pharaoh before the plague was sent. Moses was to tell Pharaoh to let the children of Israel go and that they may serve him. Again, it should be noted that God was demanding a complete release, something that Pharaoh as of yet was unwilling to give. Remembering this will be important when it comes to the next episode. If Pharaoh would not release Israel, God would send swarms of flies upon the land. The first 2 plagues came from the Nile, an object of the Egyptian worship. The third plague came from the earth, an object of the Egyptian worship, while this plague would come from the atmosphere, yet another object of Egyptian worship. So as far as we have seen, God is plaguing Egypt with things and objects that they worship, further proclaiming that he is the only God that is to be worshipped. The swarms of flies being described here is most likely what we would call a dog fly or a stable fly, a blood-sucking fly most often found in and around where cattle are kept. When enraged by men and women, these flies would fasten themselves upon the body, especially on the edges of the eyelids, meaning that this plague would be quite dreadful. The plague of flies was foretold to infest everything: Pharaoh, his servants, his people, the houses, and the ground. However, God would be merciful to the land of Goshen, for that is where Israel dwelt. He would not send the swarms of flies there, so that they may know that Jehovah is in the midst of the land. Whether or not this meant that the first 3 plagues were all over Egypt, including Goshen, cannot be said with certainty. However, this plague, we do know, would not be felt by Israel. When did this plague occur? Tomorrow. It is important that God made a point of telling Pharaoh the exact time that the plague would come. That it wouldn't happen immediately meant that it couldn't be chalked up to a mere coincidence. That it didn't happen that afternoon meant that Moses and Aaron couldn't be accused of looking far off in the distance and seeing a swarm of flies coming and then creating this prediction to make it appear that God had sent the flies. No, by stating that the plague would happen tomorrow meant that Moses and Aaron could not have seen these flies coming, but they would arrive only by the power of God. The delay also gave Pharaoh a full day in which to relent, but he did not. So the next day the Lord did as he said he would. He sent the swarms of flies into Egypt, and it is said to have corrupted the land. Having one housefly in your home can tend to drive a person crazy, so I cannot imagine what having swarms of flies in the house would do. Add to that these flies weren't common houseflies, but blood-sucking flies, and that would just increase the problem. Pharaoh could have prevented this by simply letting the people go, but he didn't, so he was being punished. We do see these plagues getting to Pharaoh, though. for he is going to offer Moses a compromise in the next set of verses. We'll discuss what that compromise is and what Pharaoh's actions afterwards are, the Lord willing, in the next episode. With that, our time is up for today. Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Exodus chapter 8, verses 25 to 32, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time.
I'm not ashamed.
Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.
Of his cross.